This is my focus stick. You want to know what I use this stick for? I put the camera on one-shot autofocus, and then I reach over and I hit the focus button, and then supposedly I'm in focus. So, and then I reach over and I hit the record button. This is what you do when you don't have a cameraman. You improvise. What I want to do today is help you get the most out of your webcam. Like I've said before, I've been going to school lately, and a lot of the things that we're learning in school is how to use cameras properly. And one of the funny things is we're learning on these, big, expensive cinema cameras. I'm recording this on a big, expensive cinema camera, but a lot of the things that we're using can relate back to even simple things like webcams. So what I want to do today is to sort of help you out. Back before I knew anything about cameras at all, my videos and my streams and my YouTube videos kind of look like crap. There's a lot of stuff that I think a lot of people, when they're trying to make videos, they just blame the fact that they're using a webcam, or they're using lesser gear. And you don't want to go out and buy big expensive cameras like this one. You want to be able to use the stuff that you have access to. Part of being a small YouTuber especially is using what you have available to you. So what I'm using here today is a pretty common webcam. Now, of course, the things I'm going to be showing you today are pretty specific to this Logitech camera, but more to the point, what I want to get across here is the idea of getting into the settings and making the camera look the best it can. Right here, you see the shot that I have on this Logitech webcam. This is, I just plugged it in, turned it on, and this is the image it gave me. Obviously, I'm way overblown here. I've got so many lights here, it's ridiculous. So actually, I'm gonna turn off these lights, and I'm gonna show you, first of all, why we need light. So this is our shot without any light at all. Obviously, it's super dark. So what do most cameras do when the shot is this dark? The first thing like a big, expensive camera is going to do is try to open up the iris as much as it goes. Now, if you see on my main camera, this is the iris open as far as it goes. So what other options do we have in a low light situation? We actually have what's called gain. So on my main camera, I'm going to turn up the gain, and I'm going to show you what happens when I turn up the gain enough to see me. So when we're looking at gain, we're looking at this number right here, the 0 dB. 0 dB just means that it's not doing any sort of like post-processing on the image to boost the levels. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna boost up that dB, boost up that gain level on the main camera, and show you what it does to the image when we boost that in the camera. And there we go. And now you can see me again. As you can see here, on my main camera here, it's boosted up to 30 dB. So as you can see, with just this, changing that one setting, my big main expensive camera looks really grainy. The image isn't as nice as it was before, and that's the gain. That's the camera trying to boost the signal artificially as much as it can to give you enough light so you can see the image. And this here on this big expensive camera is exactly the same reason why your webcam will look grainy and miserable in a lot of situations, because you're not giving the camera enough light. So the first thing you want to do before anything else is give yourself enough light. Light is so important when you're doing any kind of video work at all. I'm only a student now. I have lots to learn, but that is like day one. The first thing they teach you is light, light, light. Don't make the camera do more work than it has to. So now let's focus a little bit on our webcam here. What I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna open up the Logitech software that comes with the camera. And so this is the first thing that you see when you open up the camera settings. You have a bunch of different, automatic settings. You have a priority setting, frame rate or exposure. We don't want to mess with any of that. That's not going to help us a lot. This is amateur hour. What we want to do is go into advanced. All right, I'm just going to move that. And right down here where it says advanced, I'm just going to click that. And this is where we get into all of the all the settings that we have to mess with. Now, here's the thing I'm gonna do first thing, 100% of the time, on any camera that I'm using. I'm gonna turn off the auto. So I'm gonna turn off auto white balance, I'm gonna turn off auto gain, I'm gonna swoop over here, I'm gonna turn off the autofocus. Autofocus, to me personally, is one of the most important things. Do you ever have it where you're using a webcam and you move even the slightest bit, you go back, you go forth, and it's just like blip, 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 blip. That's the autofocus. There is absolutely no reason to have autofocus on your webcam. The depth of field on a webcam isn't great enough to have you get super out of focus by just doing these slight movements that you're doing when you're playing a video game in front of your computer. Keep that autofocus off, set the focus manually, have it stay there, and it won't be going in and out like crazy all the time. That's probably the most annoying thing to see on a webcam, is that autofocus just flickering like crazy. Turn it off. Turn it off. So we've turned that off. Our focus is fine, and you can adjust the focus too. So like there, focus, 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 and more often than not, you're gonna slide it all the way over here, and you're just gonna keep it. That's just it, and it'll just stay there. It'll be in focus the whole time. You'll be perfect. Now let's look at a few different settings and play around with them and really see what these settings do. And I encourage you to play around with these settings and see for yourself what they do. So right here, we have the exposure. This is sort of like an iris setting on a bigger camera, but the exposure is really interesting on these webcams because they also are tied to your frame rate. So if I go all the way up here and really overexpose it, you see my frame rate takes a huge dive. So if frame rate's really important to you, maybe you want to keep your exposure down a bit. These settings here, the zoom, whatever, we're never gonna play with those again. That's all artificial. That's taking away from your image. If you're zooming in on this, it's not like the glass itself in the camera is moving. It's just artificially enhancing that image, and it's not gonna make it look very good. So don't use the zoom at all. Same with the pan and the tilt. Don't leave those alone. You don't need those. And then we get over here, and we have a few different things, but the most important for me is gonna be this gain setting, right? Now remember when I showed you what happened when I boosted the gain on my big, expensive main camera here? It made it look really grainy and awful. And that's exactly what gain does on a webcam as well. So if I come over here and I turn the exposure all the way down, right? And I boost this gain, which is generally what these webcams like to do. They boost the gain. All of a sudden, and let's just make this, all of a sudden, we're getting what most webcams look like. It has that grain to it. It's not very sharp. It's not very crisp. This is what most webcams look like because most webcams are set on auto gain. And the first thing these cameras do when they don't get enough light is they crank up the gain setting because apparently these companies think that people don't care what the image actually looks like. I don't know. So if you have given your camera enough light like we have now, and you don't have to use as much light as I'm using here. I'm using a hell of a lot of light because I like using a lot of light. But just if you're noticing you're a little dark, get a lamp, get a desk lamp, get creative with the things you have around the house. Find ways to use what you have around the house. You don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Use the stuff that you have already. Just get enough light in the room. Turn on the light when you're playing games in your room instead of leaving them off. Don't rely on the monitor to light your face because that can go, back and forth. Anyway, so what we're gonna do then is I'm actually going to turn up my exposure a little bit. I'm gonna come down. I'm gonna turn the gain way down. Almost, yeah, so I have enough light in this room that I can turn the gain all the way down. And even the exposure is gonna be pretty far down. Now look at this image compared to what it was before. it's sharper, it's crisper. And notice when I move around, it's not flickering in and out. It's not doing a whole lot of like crazy, it's not being distracting. Now we just have a really nice image that if we compare it to my big expensive camera, suddenly it's not that far off. And another thing that we want to do here is this white balance thing is really key to a good image. Auto white balance can be really bad as well. Just like autofocus, if it's trying to find the perfect white balance all the time while you're streaming or while you're recording a video or whatever you're doing with your webcam, if it's trying to do a bunch of stuff, I remember I used to do a bunch of videos in front of a green screen, and it would constantly make my skin look purple because it couldn't figure out what to white balance against. The auto white balance was not good. So you really don't want to leave that on auto either. So what you want to do is you want to turn this off and you want to kind of just adjust it yourself. And as you can see, this just takes some fine tuning, and this takes, a bit of an eye. What you want to do is just make the image look like it looks around, right? Another interesting way to sort of game the white balance, if you don't want to be fiddling too much with it, a good way to get a good white balance on a webcam is to do what you do with any sort of camera. This is a sort of a trick that you do even on the big expensive cameras, is you get like a white piece of paper right here, right? So it has some white information to work off of. You hold it up to it, and that way it has lots of white information in the frame. Then you come over here, put it on auto for a second, and it's gonna give you a nice white balance, and then turn it off again. And then you leave it. The trick is turning the auto off again once it has a good white balance, and then your picture looks great. And then you can come around here and adjust the brightness a little if you want. Honestly, I wouldn't play with that too much, because again, that's a lot of this, like brightness, contrast, whatever, is all artificially enhancing the image, and you don't want to do that inside this software. It's not great. If you want to mess around with it a little bit though, but I guess the biggest thing I want you to take away from this is to play around. Don't settle for what your webcam gives you when you just plug it in. Go into these settings, play around with them, get the image that you want, and enhance your overall like stream or YouTube or whatever you're doing. Don't keep it on autofocus. Don't do a lot of these things that you see throughout YouTube and Twitch and everything. Step up your game, and you don't have to buy a bunch of different gear and a bunch of different things and super expensive cameras and all this stuff to have a good image. You can just use the webcam you probably already own. Anyway, thank you guys for being here and being awesome as always. Love your faces and your butts, and I'll see you in the next video.